I never thought my knees would give out before my pride. But as I lay there on the pavement, my face flushed against the rough edge of a concrete step. It was neither pain nor embarrassment that hit me first. It was betrayal. The kind that hums low in your chest before your mind can catch up. It happened outside the corner grocery on 8th Street, the one with cracked tiles and a produce stand that always smelled of onions and ripe bananas. I just picked up a few things for the week: canned soup, powdered milk, a bundle of wilted spinach that was still cheap enough to feel like a win. My hand gripped the rusted handle of my shopping cart as I stepped off the curb. Slower now than I used to be, my cane tucked beneath my arm. 3 steps. That's all it was. But the heel of my right shoe snagged on the lip of the second one, and suddenly I was falling. There's a moment when your body forgets its age, when muscle memory leaps in to protect you. But 72-year-old knees aren't built for mid-air. Corrections. My groceries went flying. The cane hit the ground before I did, and I landed hard hip first, then elbow, then cheek. I must have blacked out for a second. The sun was above me when I opened my eyes again, and I could taste iron in my mouth. A sour kind of silence followed, until I heard the laughter. No, not laughter. Giggles. A voice. Oh my God, Mom's going viral. My daughter's voice. I turned my head slowly. Pain stiffened my neck. Jessica stood 5 feet away. Her phone pointed straight at me. She didn't rush forward. She didn't ask if I was hurt. She just kept filming. I blinked, confused, thinking maybe I was dreaming or delusional. But then she added, "Wait till TikTok sees this one. Grammar goes down hard." I tried to push myself up, but my right wrist gave out. My side throbbed. With every breath, a man in a blue hoodie rushed over before Jessica did, kneeling beside me with concerned eyes. He helped me to a seated position, his arm around my back. "You okay, Mom?" he asked. Jessica only then lowered her phone. "I got it all," she said breathlessly. "The sound, the fall, the groceries, God, it's perfect." I didn't speak. Couldn't. My body screamed, and my heart, it sank like an anchor thrown into the ocean, not just because of the pain, but because of her voice, the thrill in it. The cold absence of concern. They say, when you get old, you become invisible. I had always believed Jessica saw me. I raised her alone after her father died. Braided her hair before school. Held her while she sobbed over college rejection letters. I even gave up my own therapy sessions to pay for hers. But now, her eyes weren't on me at all, they were on her screen. Later that evening, I sat at the edge of my bed, a bag of frozen peas balanced against my hip, and watched the video myself. Jessica had uploaded it under the title "Old Lady Takes a Tumble LL." It had over 50,000 views. I could see the comments flooding in. That cane yeeted itself out of there. She fell like a sack of potatoes. Boomer busted. There were laughing emojis. People tagging friends. Strangers making jokes about my body, my age, my worth. But it wasn't the comments that shattered me. It was Jessica's voice again. Faint but crystal clear in the background. "Oh my God, Mom's going viral." "No. Are you okay?" "No." "Let me help you." Just numbers. Views. Likes. Profits. I stared at my phone, hands trembling. My surgical scar. A pale curve of white beneath my wristwatch, pulsed with memory. Decades ago, I'd had that surgery after collapsing from exhaustion at my second job. A housekeeper gig I took to pay Jessica's middle school tuition. Back then, I told myself it was worth it. Every ache, every scar, every hour lost was for her. But what was this? That night, I didn't eat dinner. I unplugged the microwave and pushed the food aside. I sat on the couch with the lights off, St. Christopher's medallion cold against my chest. I kept replaying the video. Not because I wanted to, I wanted nothing more than to unsee it. But I couldn't stop. I had to understand what she saw when she looked at me through that lens. Was it just a prop? A character in her performance? Jessica texted once. "Mum, don't be dramatic. It's just the internet. I'll send you some of the ad money." Ad money. As if that were the same as dignity. I turned off my phone. I lay down, fully clothed, still clutching the medallion. It had been a gift from my father when I was 8, a man who vanished a year later and never came back. I remember him placing it in my palm and saying, "This is for protection." I'd always thought he meant from the world, but maybe, now, it had to protect me from my own. By morning, the phone hadn't stopped vibrating. Each chime felt like a knock against my ribs. Every buzz, a reminder of something I hadn't wanted to believe. I'd barely slept, maybe an hour, 2 at most, but it wasn't the bruises that kept me awake. It was the sound of Jessica's voice echoing in my ears. "Mom's going viral." When I finally gathered the nerve to check again, the video had crossed 150,000 views. Someone had added music over it. A jaunty ukulele tune that made my collapse look like slapstick comedy. Another person had looped it into a meme, my cane flying in slow motion, with bold white letters that read, "Boomers when they see stairs." I scrolled in silence, my hand cold and damp against the smooth screen. Every swipe felt like scraping open a wound. Then the call started. Marisol, from the church choir, left a message asking if I was okay. I saw something online. "Was that really you?" Followed by an awkward pause and a hurried goodbye. Linda, my former co-worker at the school office, texted a screenshot of the video. "Your daughter posted this?" I thought it had to be fake. Fake. As though my humiliation was so complete, it couldn't possibly be real. Jessica showed up around noon, unannounced, which was unusual even for her. She walked in like she always did, without knocking, without asking, still wearing the same leather jacket she'd had since college, her lips painted in the same reckless shade of red. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the phone screen. The video paused on the exact frame where my head hit the ground. Jessica dropped her purse on the counter, like we were about to catch up over coffee. "Mum, you wouldn't believe the engagement metrics. It's already monetizing." I didn't answer. She poured herself water from the sink, leaned against the fridge, and sighed as if she were the one under siege. "Look, before you say anything, this wasn't meant to be hurtful. I was just documenting life. That's what content is. Raw, unscripted life." "Content," I repeated, my voice low. She nodded, sipping. "Exactly." I placed the phone on the table, face down. My fingers were shaking again, but I tried not to show it. "You didn't help me up, Jessica." That stopped her for a second. She blinked, tilted her head. "What?" "When I fell, you filmed me. You watched me hit the ground. You didn't help. A stranger did." Jessica rolled her eyes and set her glass down harder than she needed to. "I didn't realize you were that hurt. People fall, Mom. You used to laugh when America's Funniest Home Videos came on. What's the difference?" I stood slowly. My hip ached. The bruise had turned a deep plum beneath my nightgown, which I still hadn't changed out of. "The difference is, they weren't filmed by their children. They didn't expect their pain to be seen by millions." Jessica crossed her arms. "You're overreacting. I'm doing everything I can to keep us afloat. Do you think your pension covers enough? You've said it yourself, you worry about money." That word again. Money. As though dignity was a currency to be bartered away. "And that justifies this?" I asked, pointing at the phone. "Making a joke out of your own mother." She didn't answer, just looked at me with a flicker of something I couldn't tell if it was shame or stubbornness. Maybe both. Then she said, we could split the revenue. 50-50. I can show you the back-end TikToks already reached out about licensing. Licensing. Like my body, my stumble, my pain, were now intellectual property. I sat back down. Slower this time, the breath heavy in my chest. You think this is normal, but it's not. It's cruel. Her voice rose. Don't pretend you're innocent. You posted pictures of me crying after my middle school recital, remember that? Or when I had that rash on vacation and you thought it was hilarious to show the world. The words struck me like ice water. Not because they were wrong, but because I had forgotten. Or rather, I had chosen to forget. I looked down at the scar on my wrist. So many moments I had told myself were harmless. Joyful, even Jessica's first haircut, her first heartbreak, all shared online with captions and filters. Never asking if she wanted them remembered that way. Was this the fruit of those seeds I had planted? She was still talking. You've spent your whole life making me look like a story. Now I do the same and you act like it's betrayal. I didn't speak. I couldn't. She took a breath, then pulled her phone from her pocket. I've actually been planning a new series. It's called Life with Grandma. A kind of documentary, you know? Real aging. Real moments. People love it. I looked up. Her eyes were bright not with love, but with anticipation. And did you ask me? I said, what? Did you ask if I wanted to be your subject? She scoffed. It's not like that. I stood again, pressing my palm against the wall for support. My voice cracked, but I kept it steady. You need to leave. Mom. Now. The room went still. Jessica stared at me for a few seconds, then grabbed her bag, her mouth tight. You're being ridiculous, she muttered, heading for the door. I turned away before I could watch her go. When the door closed. I stood there for a long while. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. I wanted to cry but didn't. The tears were stuck somewhere between fury and grief. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I unplugged the microwave and pushed the food aside. I sat on the couch with the lights off. St. Christopher's medallion cold against my chest. I kept replaying the video. Not because I wanted to, I wanted nothing more than to unsee it. But I couldn't stop. I had to understand what she saw when she looked at me through that lens. Was it just a prop? A character in her performance? Jessica texted once. Mum, don't be dramatic. It's just the internet. I'll send you some of the ad money. Ad money. As if that were the same as dignity. I turned off my phone. I lay down. Fully clothed, still clutching the medallion. It had been a gift from my father when I was 8, a man who vanished a year later and never came back. I remember him placing it in my palm and saying, "This is for protection." I'd always thought he meant from the world. But maybe, now it had to protect me from my own. By morning, the phone hadn't stopped vibrating. Each chime felt like a knock against my ribs. Every buzz, a reminder of something I hadn't wanted to believe. I'd barely slept, maybe an hour, 2 at most, but it wasn't the bruises that kept me awake. It was the sound of Jessica's voice echoing in my ears. Mom's going viral. When I finally gathered the nerve to check again, the video had crossed 150,000 views. Someone had added music over it. A jaunty ukulele tune that made my collapse look like slapstick comedy. Another person had looped it into a meme, my cane flying in slow motion with bold white letters that read, "Boomers when they see stairs." I scrolled in silence, my hand cold and damp against the smooth screen. Every swipe felt like scraping open a wound. Then the call started. Marisol, from the church choir, left a message asking if I was okay. I saw something online. Was that really you? followed by an awkward pause and a hurried goodbye. Linda, my former co-worker at the school office, texted a screenshot of the video. Your daughter posted this? I thought it had to be fake. Fake. As though my humiliation was so complete it couldn't possibly be real. Jessica showed up around noon, unannounced, which was unusual even for her. She walked in like she always did without knocking, without asking, still wearing the same leather jacket she'd had since college, her lips painted in the same reckless shade of red. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the phone screen. The video paused on the exact frame where my head hit the ground. Jessica dropped her purse on the counter, like we were about to catch up over coffee. Mom, you wouldn't believe the engagement metrics. It's already monetizing. I didn't answer. She poured herself water from the sink, leaned against the fridge, and sighed as if she were the one under siege. Look. Before you say anything, miss. Wasn't meant to be hurtful. I was just documenting life. That's what content is. Raw, unscripted life. Content, I repeated, my voice low. She nodded, sipping. Exactly. I placed the phone on the table, face down. My fingers were shaking again, but I tried not to show it. You didn't help me up, Jessica. That stopped her for a second. She blinked, tilted her head. What? When I fell, you filmed me. You watched me hit the ground. You didn't help. A stranger did. Jessica rolled her eyes and set her glass down harder than she needed to. I didn't realize you were that hurt. People fall, Mom. You used to laugh when America's Funniest Home Videos came on. What's the difference? I stood slowly, my hip ached. The bruise had turned a deep plum beneath my nightgown, which I still hadn't changed out of. The difference is, they weren't filmed by their children. They didn't expect their pain to be seen by millions. Jessica crossed her arms. You're overreacting. I'm doing everything I can to keep us afloat. Do you think your pension covers enough? You've said it yourself, you worry about money. That word again. Money. As though dignity was a currency to be bartered away. And that justifies this? I asked, pointing at the phone. Making a joke out of your own mother? She didn't answer. Just looked at me with a flicker of something. I couldn't tell if it was shame or stubbornness. Maybe both. Then she said, we could split the revenue. 50-50. I can show you the back-end TikToks already reached out about licensing. Licensing. Like my body, my stumble, my pain, were now intellectual property. I sat back down. Slower this time, the breath heavy in my chest. You think this is normal, but it's not. It's cruel. Her voice rose. Don't pretend you're innocent. You posted pictures of me crying after my middle school recital, remember that? Or when I had that rash on vacation, and you thought it was hilarious to show the world. The words struck me like ice water. Not because they were wrong, but because I had forgotten. Or rather, I had chosen to forget. I looked down at the scar on my wrist. So many moments I had told myself were harmless, joyful, even Jessica's first haircut, her first heartbreak, all shared online with captions and filters. Never asking if she wanted them remembered that way. Was this the fruit of those seeds I had planted? She was still talking. You've spent your whole life making me look like a story. Now I do the same and you act like it's betrayal. I didn't speak. I couldn't. She took a breath, then pulled her phone from her pocket. I've actually been planning a new series. It's called Life with Grandma. A kind of documentary, you know? Real aging. Real moments. People love it. I looked up. Her eyes were bright not with love, but with anticipation. And did you ask me? I said, what? Did you ask if I wanted to be your subject? She scoffed. It's not like that. I stood again, pressing my palm against the wall for support. My voice cracked, but I kept it steady. You need to leave. Mom. Now. The room went still. Jessica stared at me for a few seconds, then grabbed her bag, her mouth tight. You're being ridiculous, she muttered, heading for the door. I turned away before I could watch her go dot when the door closed. I stood there for a long while. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. I wanted to cry but didn't. The tears were stuck somewhere between fury and grief. That night, I didn't eat again. Instead, I pulled the curtains shut and lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't just bruised in the body. I was bruised in the memory, in the knowing that I had once done to her, in my own smaller ways, what she now did to me. A pattern, a mirror, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to break it. There's a sound I hadn't heard in decades, but it came back to me that night. The creak of a cheap folding chair on a splintered wooden floor, and the slow click of a camera shutter. In a room with no real light. I thought I'd buried that memory, that the dust of years and the weight of motherhood had pressed it so deep, it couldn't rise again. But trauma doesn't rot in the dark. It waits. After Jessica left and I sat, alone in the hush of my small apartment, the ache behind my ribs wasn't just from her betrayal. It came from something older than her, older than even the woman I am now. It came from the girl I used to be. I was 10 years old when Mama told me to wear my Sunday dress on a Tuesday. It was pale yellow, too tight at the waist and frayed. At the hem, she braided my hair with trembling fingers and said I had to smile, but not too much. That we had company coming. That I was going to be a star. At first, I believed her. She said there was a man who took pictures for magazines. He'd seen me once in town, and said I had a face the camera would love. I didn't know what that meant, but I wanted to make Mammy proud. I always wanted that. The man smelled like sweet smoke and wore rings on each finger. He brought a camera the size of a shoebox and a folding light with a yellow bulb. Mama hovered in the kitchen, her voice higher than usual as she offered him iced tea and nervously fixed her hair. He sat up in our living room, the same room where I did my homework, and where Mana fought with my stepfather after too many beers. He moved the coffee table aside and unrolled a white sheet on the floor like it was a stage. Stand here, he said, pointing to the center of the sheet. Tilt your head. No, the other way, chin down. Smile like you're hiding a secret. At first, the poses felt like a game. He said things like, beautiful and natural light, and fashion spread. But then he told me to lift the dress just a little, to pull the strap off one shoulder, to lean back against the wall like I was resting. Even though I wasn't tired, I looked toward Mama. She was smoking by the window. She didn't look back. When I tried to cover myself, the man laughed. Don't be shy. You want to be a model, don't you? I didn't, but I didn't know how to say no. Later, I asked Mama why he needed pictures like that. She snapped at me, said I should be grateful. That girls from families like ours didn't get chances like this. That my attitude would ruin everything. So I stayed quiet. For weeks afterward, he came back. With new ideas, new lights. Sometimes Mama wasn't even in the room. And every time I felt something slip from me, a piece of trust, a thread of safety, I told myself it was just a phase. Something to endure, like all the other things girls endured in our town. Years later, I'd understand it for what it was. Exploitation, plain and cruel. But as a child, I didn't have the words. Just a feeling that what happened in that room changed the way I looked at my own body. The way I looked at women who smiled too easily. The way I looked at love. I never told anyone, not even Jessica's father. Not during the best or worst years of our marriage. And when he died, that silence became something sacred. I wore it like a second skin, always pretending it hadn't mattered. But now, with Jessica holding up a screen like a lens and turning my fall into a punchline, something split inside me. It wasn't just the video. It was the knowing that she had learned this way of capturing pain and calling it content from somewhere. From me. Because I'd done it too, hadn't I? I remembered posting a photo of Jessica at 13. Her face red from tears after a recital where she forgot her lines. I thought it was funny, relatable even. Drama queen alert, I'd captioned it, tagging it with silly emojis and watching the likes come in. At the time, I called it love. I told myself I was keeping memories. But now I saw what it really was. She had been my subject before I was ever hers. I stood and went to the bookshelf in the corner of the room. There, among the family albums and forgotten birthday cards, was a thin folder wrapped in twine. I hadn't opened it in years. My fingers hesitated on the knot. Heart-pounding. Inside were 2 photographs. Only 2 survived. One was bent at the corners, the colors faded but still there. Me, age 10, standing barefoot on that white sheet, chin tilted, eyes wide with confusion. The second was of Mama, arms crossed, leaning against our kitchen wall with that same nervous smile. I stared at the girl in the picture, not just at her body, but at her eyes wide and uncertain, already learning how to make herself small. She didn't look like someone who would become a woman brave enough to stop the cycle. But maybe she could. Maybe I still could. I placed the photos back into the folder, but this time I didn't hide them. I left them out on the table, beside the phone. Beside the silence, the girl I once was and the woman I had become were finally sitting in the same room. And neither of them would be a prop again. There's a particular kind of ache that comes not from being hurt, but from realizing you once hurt someone else in the same way. It began to surface slowly, like sediment stirred from the bottom of a river. After opening that old folder, I sat in silence for a long time, my thumb resting on the edge of the photograph, brushing the image of the little girl I once was. But behind her face was another memory, one more recent, one that brought the sting of shame in a different key. Jessica had been 12 when her father died. We had just moved into the small condo I still lived in now, the one with the peeling linoleum in the kitchen and the window that always stuck. I had wanted to start fresh, to give her stability after so much loss. But grief doesn't make space for order. It makes a mess of everything, especially parenting. I had thrown myself into surviving. 2 jobs, 3 side hustles, and a head full of anxiety. I had to keep the lights on, I told myself. I had to keep her enrolled in that arts magnet school. I had to make sure she had what other girls had, what I never did. And somewhere in that storm, I reached for validation. Not from her, but from the world. I remember it so clearly now. Her first day of 8th grade. She wore a red hoodie and jeans too long for her legs, her hair in a messy ponytail, because I didn't have time to brush it for her. I snapped a photo. At the front door, trying to capture a milestone. She looked annoyed. I posted it anyway. Grumpy girl, but proud mom. We survived the summer. That was the caption. And it got dozens of likes. Another time, she had chickenpox. Her face was swollen, pocked with spots, and she was crying because her school was hosting a field trip she couldn't attend. I thought, she looked sweet in her misery, all curled up in bed. I posted a picture. Poor baby missing out, but still adorable. She didn't speak to me the rest of that day. At the time, I brushed it off. I told myself it was just adolescence. That she was moody, that I was allowed to share our lives. I believed I was preserving memories, that I was documenting joy, but I see it now for what it was. Exposure without consent. And not unlike what Jessica did to me. She grew up with her life half broadcasted, her sadness dressed up in clever captions. Her private moments used to fill a silence I couldn't face. I never asked how it made her feel. I only cared how it made me feel validated, seen, worthy. It's a bitter thing, realizing your daughter learned carelessness at your knee. That night, I pulled out one of the old external drives I'd stored in the hall closet. It had thousands of photos, some of her as a baby in a bathtub, some of her sulking in the back seat during road trips, images I hadn't looked at in years. I opened the folders one by one, watching a slideshow of her girlhood unfold. Always been expressive, her face quick to change with every emotion. But in the later photos, around age 13 or 14, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Her smile dimming, her posture slumping, her eyes flicking away from the camera more often than not. By the time she was 16, I was barely. In the photos at all just her, posing stiffly at holidays, arms crossed, lips flat. I thought then that she was pulling away because of hormones, or friends, or grief. I didn't think she was pulling away from me, but I had given her reason to. A few days later, I reached out. Not to her, no. Not yet. I wasn't ready for that. Instead, I called Maria. Maria had been a fellow parent in Jessica's old school PTA group. We'd lost touch over the years, but she had always been kind. And I remembered she'd gone back to school for social work. I found her number in an old email chain and dialed with trembling fingers. She remembered me right away. Her voice was gentle, patient. I need to talk to someone, I said after a long silence. About something I've done. Something I passed down. She didn't ask for details. She just said, "Do you want a referral for a therapist who works with older adults? I know someone who specializes in family dynamics." I said yes, before I could second-guess myself. That evening, I stood at the mirror and looked at myself. For a long time, I wasn't thinking about the bruises on my hip, or the pain in my wrist, or the weight under my eyes. I was thinking about the girl in the yellow dress, and the teenager in the red hoodie. I was thinking about legacy not just in name or blood, but in behavior. What we leave behind in the hearts of those who follow us. I took the St. Christopher medallion in my hand, the one that had once been pressed into my palm with a blessing. And I whispered aloud, not to God exactly, and not to Jessica, but to that part of me that still wanted to do better. No more pretending it didn't matter. No more silence. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to resolve. It took 3 more days before I could bring myself to call her. Each morning I woke with a heavier chest, not just from the pain of the fall, but from something deeper: shame, fear, the brittle edge of regret. I knew I couldn't stay quiet. Not again. Not this time. I called Jessica on a Thursday. The sky outside was dull, overcast, with the kind of grey that made every corner of my apartment feel a little more fragile. I told her I wanted to talk, face to face. No phones, no recordings. Just us. She arrived late, as always, sweeping in like a gust of perfume and impatience. She didn't sit right away, just hovered near the kitchen island, arms crossed, tapping the toe of her boot against the tile. "I'm not taking it down, if that's what this is about," she said before I could speak. I was seated at the small dining table, a cup of tea going cold in front of me. My hands were folded neatly in my lap, the St. Christopher medallion resting just above my heart. "I didn't ask you here to make demands," I said. "I asked you here so you could listen." Jessica rolled her eyes, but she pulled out a chair and sat, arms still crossed. I looked at her and saw flashes, not just the daughter I'd raised, but the baby who once wrapped her tiny fingers around mine, the little girl who insisted on wearing fairy wings to the grocery store, The teenager who built a wall of sarcasm so thick I nearly gave up trying to scale it. But now, here we were, across a table, separated by silence and screens and the weight of everything we'd never said. When I was a girl, I began slowly, someone used my image without my consent. It wasn't a funny video. It wasn't for likes. But it was something taken from me. My comfort. My voice. Jessica's eyes narrowed. Why are you telling me this now? Because I didn't know I was doing the same thing to you, I said. When I posted those photos of you crying. When I shared things that weren't mine to share. She shifted in her seat, jaw tightening. I thought I was documenting our life, I continued. But really, I was looking for proof. Proof that I was a good mother. Proof that we were surviving. Proof that I mattered. Jessica looked away. I see now how that made you feel, how it taught you something I never meant to teach. Her voice came out brittle. You think that justifies you turning this all around on me? No, I said gently. It doesn't justify anything, but it helps me understand why we're here. She stood abruptly. You think you get to lecture me now, after all the things you posted about me growing up? You built your whole identity on my childhood. And now I make one video and suddenly I'm the villain. I took a breath, steadying myself against the wave of her anger. It's not about villains, I said. It's about harm. And whether we're brave enough to name it. Jessica laughed, but it sounded more like a bark. You didn't care about harm when I begged you to take down that photo of me in the hospital. Or when I told you not to post that video of me singing off key. You said it was funny. You said people loved it. She was right, Dot, and now it was my turn to listen. I hurt you, I said. I see that now. She blinked, caught off guard. I normalized the idea that your pain, your mistakes, were fair game. I made you a subject before I ever gave you the tools to say no. And now you're doing the same to me. Only it's not just a few people on Facebook, it's the whole world. Jessica's hands trembled slightly as she rested them on the back of her chair. I didn't mean to, she whispered. I thought ... I thought if people saw how quirky you are, how real, maybe we could make something of it. Something, I echoed, not someone. We stood there for a moment, locked in something that wasn't forgiveness, but wasn't accusation either. I can't undo what I did, she said quietly. No, I said. Neither can I. She finally sat down. Again, the silence between us softened a little. I've been planning something, she confessed. A series. Life with Grandma. A whole channel. I wanted to show people what aging looks like. You're funny, you're stubborn. You say wild things. I thought it would work. I swallowed the heat in my throat. Did you ever ask me if I wanted to be part of that? She didn't answer. I'm not your story, Jessica. I'm your mother. She looked down at her hands. Her voice dropped. I don't know how to stop needing people to see me. That struck something deep inside me. Because I knew that feeling. That hunger. That loneliness masquerading as performance. You don't have to be seen by strangers to matter, I said. Jessica nodded, but her eyes were glassy. I think I need help, she said. I reached across the table, slowly, and placed my hand over hers. So do I. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. But in that moment, something shifted. A sliver of truth broke the surface, and maybe, just maybe, that was the start of something new. I knew I was unraveling when I dropped the kettle trying to make tea. 1 second I was steady, turning the dial to low heat. The next, my wrist gave out and the steel clanged to the floor, scalding water rushing out like a warning. My breath hitched, sharp and quick, and for a long moment I couldn't tell if the sting came from my wrist, my hip, or something deeper, something behind the ribs where grief hides. I sat down on the kitchen floor, legs folded awkwardly beneath me. The floor was cold, the tile pressing into my knees. I didn't cry. I just stared at the overturned kettle and listened to the silence. Since Jessica's visit, the house had taken on a strange quiet. We hadn't spoken again. Not because we fought, no. There was something more uncertain than rage between us now. Like standing on cracked ice, waiting to see if it would hold. I wanted to believe the confrontation had changed something, but in truth, it had cracked something inside me that hadn't healed since the fall. Not just bones or tendons, though. My wrist still throbbed, and my hip colored like storm bruises. But something essential. I had spent so long keeping busy, keeping moving, pretending control. Now, with stillness came collapse. That night I didn't eat. The night after, I forgot to take my pills by the third night. My vision blurred while trying to read the dosage label on my blood pressure bottle. I stood, confused, and staggered into the bathroom wall. The crash brought my neighbor, Mrs. Chun, to the door. She was always kind, though we'd never been close. She said she heard something fall and came over, because she had a bad feeling. She found me slumped at the foot of the hallway, barely conscious, breathing too fast. I remember her voice urgent but steady, as she called 911. Her hand touched my shoulder gently, a gesture I hadn't realized I needed until I felt it at the hospital. Everything moved too fast. The fluorescent lights stung my eyes. People asked me questions I couldn't fully answer. Names, medications, dates. A nurse pulled the sleeve of my dress to insert in 4. And for the first time in decades, the old surgical scar below my wrist drew a stranger's gaze. They asked if I lived alone, yes, if I had anyone to call, pause, doppelquote, ebbing, doppelquote. I said, and it tasted unfamiliar. I didn't call her. I didn't want her to see me like that, hooked to wires. Hair tangled, lips cracked from dehydration. I didn't want her to see the toll it had taken. Or maybe, truthfully, I didn't want her to look at me through the lens of a camera again. The next day, a doctor named Sarah Kim came in. She looked young enough to be Jessica's age, but her voice carried an authority I trusted. She wore no expression of pity, only clarity. That helped. Your blood pressure was dangerously high, she told me. And you're severely dehydrated. When was the last time you ate a full meal? I had to think. Monday, I guessed. It was Friday. Dr. Kim folded her hands. Has anything stressful happened recently? I hesitated. She didn't push. She waited. That kind of waiting, that kind of silence felt like a kindness I hadn't known I needed. Eventually, I said, my daughter posted a video of me falling. It went viral. She nodded slowly. Did she ask your permission? No. And how did that make you feel? The question was so simple it hurt. I swallowed. Exposed, I said. Discarded. Like I didn't belong to myself anymore. Dr. Kim tilted her head slightly. Elder abuse comes in many forms. It's not always bruises or neglect. It can be emotional violation, financial manipulation, digital exploitation. The words fell into me like stones into water rippling in places I hadn't named. She continued, gently but firmly. You've experienced a kind of trauma. And it's not just emotional. It affects your body, your sleep, your memory, your appetite, especially in later life. I closed my eyes. Something about hearing it framed that way later life brought on a new wave of grief. Not about being old, but about how little I had protected myself, even now. I can refer you to someone, she said. A therapist who works with women in your stage of life, who understands generational trauma and how to move forward from it. I didn't answer right away, but eventually I nodded. I think I need that, I said. They kept me overnight for observation. I watched the city lights through the window, dulled by rain. Somewhere down there, people were posting videos, checking likes, scrolling past someone else's worst moment. I wondered if mine was still circulating, but I didn't reach for my phone. I reached instead for the medallion around my neck. Its edge was worn. The grooves faded, but it still had weight. Still reminded me of who I was before all this, before the camera, before the fall, before motherhood and apology and survival turned into the same breath. I had always thought strength was holding everything in, bearing it alone. But maybe strength was naming the weight, asking for help, letting someone witness you not as content, but as human. The room was quiet except for the beep of a monitor and the soft hush of rain against the glass. In that quiet, I made a promise to myself that this won't be the end of me. The first thing I noticed about Maria Santos's office was the light. It wasn't fluorescent the way I'd feared. It came in soft from a high window, golden and slow, filtering through a linen curtain that moved with the breath of a fan in the corner. Her waiting room smelled faintly of cinnamon and something herbal. The chairs were mismatched but clean, and the cushions actually gave when I sat down a kindness in themselves. "Eleanor?" she asked, stepping into the room with a clipboard tucked under her arm. Her voice was calm, not overly gentle, not performative, just present. I stood with effort and followed her down a short hallway into the therapy room. It wasn't sterile. It felt more like someone's reading nook. A tall bookshelf leaned slightly in the corner, filled with novels and journals and a few small toys, plastic animals, wooden puzzles. The kind of objects that belonged to older therapy traditions. Maria was in her early 50s, perhaps. Her dark brown hair was streaked with silver at the temples, and she wore no makeup beyond a pale gloss. I appreciated that. I didn't feel like I had to compete with her youth. She didn't weaponize it. I chose the seat nearest the window, feeling the ache in my lower back settle as I adjusted the cushion. "Thank you for seeing me," I said, unsure of where my voice might falter. Maria smiled gently and didn't rush me. "Would it be okay if I asked what brings you in?" It was such a simple question, and yet it made my throat tighten. I looked down at my hands, folded in my lap. The St. Christopher medallion felt heavy against my chest, as though its old purpose had returned to protect, to witness. I began, slowly. I think I've spent most of my life swallowing things I should have spoken. I come from a family that didn't talk about pain, or boundaries, or anything that couldn't be laughed off. Maria nodded. "And something shifted recently." I nodded too. My daughter posted a video of me falling. It went viral. Thousands of strangers laughed at it. She said it was just a joke, just life. But it felt like I'd been stripped bare. Like I didn't belong to myself anymore. Maria leaned forward slightly, her eyes kind but focused. "That must have been terrifying." I exhaled. It reminded me of something that happened when I was a child. Something I never really faced. A man who took photos of me, in ways that weren't right. And my mother let him, said I should be grateful, that it was opportunity. I paused, waiting for judgment, disbelief, a wince. But Maria stayed quiet, allowing the silence to settle into a kind of safety. "That moment," she said softly. "And the video, they echo each other." "Yes," I whispered. "I didn't see it at first. But I do now." We sat in that recognition together for a beat too long, and something inside me softened just slightly. "I want to understand why I feel this much shame," I continued. "Not just at what happened, but because I did something similar to my daughter years ago. I posted photos of her when she was crying or embarrassed. I thought it was funny. I didn't ask her. I wanted the attention. And now I wonder if she learned to treat me like this because I showed her how. Maria's brow furrowed, not with judgment but care. Eleanor, what you're naming is something called reenactment. When we're hurt, especially early in life, we often recreate similar dynamics later, both as victims and as participants. Not because we're bad people, but because our brains are trying to understand what once happened by reliving it in safer, more controlled ways. I looked up at her, startled. But I wasn't trying to hurt her. Of course not, she said. And I don't believe your daughter was trying to destroy you either. But what matters is how you both learn to make pain visible, by turning it into spectacle. I blinked hard, my vision blurring. I didn't know any other way. Maria passed me a tissue without comment. And now, I said, my voice catching, I don't know how to undo it, or if it's even possible. Maria shook her head gently. We don't undo, we acknowledge. We take responsibility. And then we begin to build new patterns. That's what healing looks like. I let those words settle. She explained that we'd be using a trauma-focused approach, EMDR. She called it eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. She said it could help me revisit the memories that had lodged themselves deep in my nervous system, keeping me in a state of quiet panic. It's not about erasing memories, she said. It's about taking the sting out of them. So you can remember and still feel safe. The thought of safety had always felt like a luxury. But now, sitting in this room with its soft fan and warm bookshelves, I realized how long I'd been living in vigilance. I'm ready, I said. Maria smiled. Then let's begin. Slowly. Together. And for the first time in a long time, I believed someone. It began with a flyer taped crookily to the community center door. Digital Rights Workshop. Thursdays, 10 a.m., empowering seniors in the online world. I hadn't planned on stopping. I'd only come to drop off canned goods for the food pantry. But something about the word empowering tugged at me. It wasn't a word I'd ever associated with technology, not for someone my age. Computers and smartphones had always felt like borrowed tools, not things meant for me. Still, I found myself inside the multi-purpose room a week later, clutching a notebook and chewing the inside of my cheek like a child on the first day of school. The instructor was a young man in his late 20s with thick-rimmed glasses and a patient voice. Carlos. He introduced himself as a digital rights advocate and explained that he'd grown up helping his grandmother navigate tech. Now I do this for everyone else's grandmother too, he joked, and something in his tone made me relax. There were 7 of us in the room, women and men in various stages of skepticism. One gentleman with tremors in both hands couldn't stop cursing at his tablet. A woman named Lucille insisted Facebook was spying on her toaster. But Carlos didn't flinch. He walked us through the basics. How to recognize scams, how to report abuse, how to adjust privacy settings on social media platforms. Then he said something that made my heart stall. You have rights, even online. Especially online. Age doesn't erase your boundaries. I raised my hand hesitantly. What if someone posts something of you without your permission? He nodded. Great question. If it's a video or image of you, and you didn't consent to it, you may be able to file a takedown request under the DMCA Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or even report it as harassment, depending on the platform and context. Even family has to respect your digital autonomy. He went on to explain the steps. How to draft a takedown notice, how to screenshot evidence, how to track view counts and link them to revenue. The terms sounded foreign, but he offered printed guides in large type and promised to walk any of us through it, 1-on-1 after class. I waited while others trickled out. He was folding chairs when I approached. "I think I need help," I said, voice lower than I meant. Someone posted a video of me falling. My daughter, it went viral. Carlos paused, blinking with concern. "Are you okay?" "Physically. I'm healing. Emotionally, not so much." "Did she ask before posting it?" "No," I said. "She filmed me lying on the pavement. And people laughed. Thousands. They made jokes. Some of them made money off of it." Carlos didn't ask if I was overreacting. He didn't smile politely and change the subject. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, and said, "Let's fix this." That afternoon, he walked me through everything. He helped me submit takedown notices to multiple platforms. We drafted a formal message citing privacy violations and digital harm. He explained how to document my communication trail. He even showed me how to monitor reposts in case the video resurfaced. By the time we finished, the video had already been taken down on one platform. My hands shook as I refreshed the page and saw the blank space where my fall had once played on a loop. It was the first time in weeks I felt I'd been heard, not pitied, not dismissed, but heard. Carlos invited me to join the center's digital storytelling group for seniors. "We help people take back their narratives," he said. "Not for clicks, for meaning." I agreed, cautiously. The next Thursday, I returned and sat in front of a tablet the center provided. At first, I just watched the others. People sharing stories about gardening, recipes, first loves, and long-forgotten childhood pranks. One woman read poetry she'd written 50 years ago and never shown anyone. A retired plumber uploaded videos explaining how to fix faucets. When it came my turn, I didn't know what to say. I cleared my throat. "I'm not sure I have anything to share that matters," I admitted. Carlos looked up from his laptop. "You do. Trust me." So I began small. I posted a short video, just my voice. No image, about growing up in a town where children weren't believed, and how that silence followed some of us into old age. Then I posted another. A recipe for my mother's empanadas, followed by a reflection on how food was often the only thing she offered in place of affection. People responded. Not hundreds, not even dozens. But a few kind comments came in from women who said, "This reminds me of my own mother," or "I never thought about it like that." I didn't crave numbers. I craved connection, and slowly, I felt something shift. I wasn't just reclaiming space, I was reshaping it. My voice, once used only in defense, was now an instrument of reflection, of resilience. One afternoon, I filmed a short piece titled, "You Are Not Too Late." I spoke directly into the lens, makeup-free, my St. Christopher medallion visible against my chest. I told other older women that we don't age out of boundaries, that our stories are not less sacred just because they come with laugh lines and creaky joints. When I posted it, I didn't tag Jessica, but I knew she saw it. Because 2 days later, she sent a message. "I watched your video. You looked strong. I didn't know that side of you." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I walked to the mirror in my hallway and looked at myself. This was the side of me I had buried under decades of silence and sacrifice. A woman not just surviving, but choosing. The day I walked into Rebecca Torres's office, I carried a manila folder packed with screenshots, timestamps, and printed comment threads. My hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from the weight of the decision I was making. I had never hired a lawyer in my life. Not for bills, not for the estate after my husband died, not even when the landlord tried to cheat me out of my deposit. But this time was different. This time, my dignity was on the line, and not just for me, The office was downtown, tucked between a florist and a tax service. No marble floors or fancy espresso machines. Just a neat row of chairs, a sturdy, wooden desk, and a potted fern that had seen better days. Rebecca herself was brisk, alert, and dressed in a navy pantsuit that gave her the air of a woman who had heard too many lies to waste time on flattery. She greeted me with a warm but direct smile. "You must be Eleanor. Come in. Let's talk." I sat across from her and placed the folder on her desk. "My daughter posted a video of me falling. It went viral. I didn't consent. I didn't even know she was filming until I saw it online." She opened the folder and began flipping through. Her eyes moved quickly. "You've done your homework." "I had help," I said. "A young man at the senior center, Carlos, showed me how to track down reposts and how to submit takedown requests. Some platforms responded, others didn't." Rebecca nodded. "Unfortunately, viral content spreads faster than any system can manage. But what you've gathered gives us a strong foundation." I watched her underline a phrase on one of the printed pages. It was a comment from a user named Laugh Track Queen, who had reposted the video with added audio and received over 300,000 likes. "I don't want revenge," I said. "I want it to stop. And I want my daughter to understand she crossed a line." Rebecca looked up. "There are a few avenues we can explore. One is a civil suit for invasion of privacy. Another is elder abuse if we can demonstrate emotional harm and financial exploitation. You may also have a case under California's digital consent laws, especially given the monetization aspect." My heart pounded at the word laws, at the formality of it all, the possibility that I would have to speak my pain in front of strangers again. "I'm not looking to ruin her life," I murmured. Rebecca's tone softened. "Taking legal action doesn't mean you're out for blood. It means you're setting a boundary with teeth." That image stayed with me. A boundary with teeth. She offered to take the case pro bono, citing an ongoing initiative focused on elder digital rights. "You'd be part of a precedent," she said. "Most people don't think of viral videos as abuse. But they can be. The damage doesn't need to be physical to be real." Over the following weeks, we built the case. I gave sworn statements. I answered questions I never thought I'd say aloud to anyone, much less to a courtroom full of strangers. I described what it felt like to be mocked by people who didn't know me, and worse by the one who should have protected me. Jessica hired a lawyer, a young man in tailored suits who specialized in influencer protection. He claimed the video was satire, that I was a public figure by virtue of its popularity, that Jessica never intended harm. Intent. That word kept circling back like a vulture. Rebecca countered with evidence, analytics, withdrawal records from Jessica's ad, revenue account, proof of merchandise tied to the viral clip. The shirts said things like, "Boomer down," and "Mom's going viral." When I saw the photos of those shirts being sold online, something inside me stilled. I hadn't imagined it. This wasn't just a joke. It was a business, built on my pain. The hardest moment came when I had to testify. I stood behind the microphone, my hand gripping the worn edge of the podium, my breath trembling in my chest. I wasn't afraid of the crowd. I was afraid of looking at Jessica. She sat at the defense table, hair pulled back, jaw tight. She didn't meet my gaze. I took a deep breath. My daughter did not strike me. She did not abandon me in a hospital or steal my bank account. But she took something else. She took my right to be seen as a person. She turned my suffering into her platform. My voice didn't crack. I didn't stammer. I simply told the truth. I come from a generation that was told to keep quiet, that what happened in the family stayed in the family. That silence is how these things root themselves, how they become normal. I won't be silent anymore. I looked briefly toward Jessica, then not with hatred, but with grief. The kind you carry long after apologies are made. The judge listened. The lawyers debated. The air was thick with arguments and citations and technicalities I didn't always follow. But I stayed. I didn't leave the room. In the end, we won a partial judgment. The video was permanently removed from all affiliated monetized accounts. Jessica was ordered to pay damages, not a large sum, but enough to make a statement. More importantly, the court acknowledged the harm. My harm. I walked out of the courthouse with Rebecca at my side. The sky above was clear, unusually so, and the sunlight felt warm against my skin. I wasn't joyful. I wasn't vindicated. I was known. That mattered more than I'd expected. The first meeting of Silver Dignity took place in the back room of a local library, tucked between the genealogy section and the emergency exit. The folding chairs creaked beneath the weight of our stories, but no one minded. We were there for something far sturdier than comfort. Carlos came up with the name. He said it sounded like both armor and light, and we all agreed it suited us. We're 6 of us at that first meeting. Robert, whose grandson had uploaded videos of him confusing names during his early dementia. Linda, whose daughter turned her chemotherapy sessions into a TikTok series, without once asking if she wanted her pain broadcast. A man named Edwin who had no children, but found himself the subject of a prank by neighborhood kids that had gone viral. And me, Eleanor, the woman who fell and was filmed. We didn't start with tears. We started with coffee and store-brand cookies, with nods across the circle and polite murmurs. But once the stories began, the quiet bloomed into something else entirely. I didn't know how ashamed I felt, Linda said, her voice barely above a whisper, until strangers began messaging me about what a brave fighter I was, based on footage I never agreed to share. Robert, his hands shaking slightly as he spoke, said, I don't remember saying half the things on those videos. But I remember how I felt when my neighbor came up to me and laughed about them. We weren't there to trade traumas. We were there to understand them, to name what had happened, not just as wrong but as real. For so long, people our age have been told we're too sensitive, that the world belongs to the young, and we should be grateful for scraps of attention. But what Silver Dignity gave us was language, context, and most powerfully solidarity. Each week we met. Each week someone new joined. A woman in her 80s, who had been live-streamed in her nursing home without consent. A retired school principal whose son created an entire comedic persona out of her private voicemails. An older couple whose wedding anniversary video had been turned into a meme about ancient lovebirds. And with each story, our resolve deepened. Carlos helped us draft a mission statement. We believe that aging does not make a person less human. We advocate for digital dignity, consent, and visibility, not virality. We sent letters to tech companies, urging them to adopt stricter protections for seniors. We wrote op-eds for local papers. I spoke trembling but firm on a panel at the city's community tech fair, sharing my experience and watching younger audience members sit in uncomfortable silence. But the most powerful moment came one afternoon, after a meeting had ended. We were stacking chairs when Robert approached me with a shy smile. I liked what you said about the difference between being seen and being used, he said. It helped me talk to my grandson. I told him I didn't want to be a joke anymore. I touched the medallion at my chest. Did he understand? Robert's eyes misted. He apologized, took the videos down, asked if I wanted to make one together on my terms. I said yes. It wasn't always perfect. Some members didn't get closure. Some families refused to see the harm. But Silver Dignity gave us something even more vital than justice. It gave us a place to belong. A place where our experiences didn't need to be minimized to be heard. At our 6th meeting, I brought empanadas. Not store-bought. Mine. From scratch. The way my mother made them before her bitterness took over the kitchen. I wanted to share something that wasn't just pain, I said. Something we can taste and remember together. We ate and laughed and argued gently over whether raisins belonged in the filling. For an hour, we weren't victims or hashtags, or faces in a freeze frame. We were people. After everyone left, I lingered behind to clean up. Carlos stood beside me, drying the mugs. "You've become a bit of a legend," he said. "People are quoting you." "Oh dear," I laughed. "I'm sure that's dangerous." "No," he said, serious now. "You gave people words they didn't have. That's power." I looked at the empty chairs, the cookie crumbs on the table, the wrinkled sign taped to the wall with our name in bold black letters. Small start, but a real one. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel alone in the world. Message came on a Tuesday morning, just as I was pulling a loaf of banana bread from the oven. "Can we talk?" Simple, no punctuation. But the space between each word carried more weight than I could name. Hadn't heard from Jessica in weeks. Not since the court ruling. Not since the panel where I'd told my story. Not even when local news had picked up the segment on Silver Dignity. I had assumed silence was her choice. Maybe even her version of protest. But I'd also stopped trying to fill in the silence with my own stories. I was learning to let space breathe. I replied later that day with 2 words. "Yes. Come." She arrived on Thursday. No camera. No entourage. Just herself. Her hair was unwashed, tucked under a faded beanie, and her hoodie sleeves were pulled down past her wrists. She looked younger than I remembered, and somehow older at the same time. She didn't knock, just stood at the threshold until I opened the door. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then I stepped aside. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and bread, and the low hum of the radiator filled the silence between us. Jessica sat on the edge of the sofa, her back straight, as if unsure whether to relax or flee. "I've been in therapy," she said before I could ask. "Twice a week. Court-ordered, but..." I kept going. I nodded, saying nothing, letting her come to her own beginning. "They asked me to talk about childhood memories," she continued. "I told them about you. The photos. The blog. The time you filmed me during that spelling bee when I cried because I lost." My hands twitched slightly in my lap. I remembered that day. I had laughed with the other parents and captioned the photo with something like, "Future novelist in the making, so many words, so few correct. I thought you were proud," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But it felt like being watched all the time. Like I was a character in your story. She didn't say it with venom. She said it with ache. I looked at her carefully. "I'm sorry I didn't know how to protect your privacy. Or your pain. I thought if I shared it, it would make us both visible. But it made you feel exposed. And I see that now." Jessica swallowed. "When I posted the video of your fall, I didn't think of it as revenge. I didn't even think of it as you. Just content." She covered her face with her hands. "God, that sounds awful." "It sounds honest," I said gently. She dropped her hands and looked at me. "After the lawsuit, my brand collapsed. Sponsorships disappeared. People unfollowed me. Some of them said I exploited my own mother. I hated them for saying it. Then I listened to one of your Silver Dignity videos. The one where you said, visibility without consent is a violation. not a compliment. And it hit me. She paused, breathing deep. That's what I did. What you did to me. What we both learned. For a long time we didn't speak. The banana bread cooled on the counter. The radiator clicked in its usual rhythm. Then Jessica reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "I've been drafting something," she said. "A public apology. Not a video. Just words. I'm submitting it to a few outlets. Not for clout. For accountability." She handed it to me, and I opened it slowly. It was a letter. Long, honest, raw. She admitted to everything: her need for validation, her blindness to the harm, her fear of irrelevance. She even quoted the therapist, who said she had inherited a survival pattern disguised as performance. At the end of the letter, she wrote, "This apology is not a rebranding. It's a reckoning. I understand now that being seen is not the same as being loved, and that no one should have to earn dignity through public pain. I owe my mother more than this apology, but it's where I begin." I looked up. Her eyes were wet. Not streaming, not staged, just quietly brimming with the weight of beginning again. "I'd like to rebuild something with you," she said. "If you'll let me." I nodded slowly. "With boundaries. With consent." "Yes," she said. "And no filming unless I say yes." "And I'll say yes rarely." She smiled faintly. "Fair. I'm not the same mother you had at 15. I added. "But I'm still learning to be someone worth knowing now." Jessica reached across the coffee table, not to grab my hand, but to place her palm near mine. An invitation, not an assumption. We sat like that, close but not clinging, breathing the same air. For the first time, it felt like we were no longer rewriting the past, but choosing how to write what came next. There are things time doesn't fix, but gentleness can soften. And that's what I noticed most in the months after the court ruling. After the meetings and letters and speaking engagements, Jessica had grown gentler. She didn't try to sweep things under the rug or pretend it was all behind us. Instead, she met me in the in-between, that uncertain space where love and harm exist side by side, where apologies are not the end, but the start of work that lasts a lifetime. We met once a week, sometimes at my apartment, sometimes for short walks. At the neighborhood park, she never brought her phone out. Not once. If it buzzed, she silenced it. If it rang, she ignored it. The woman who once craved constant online engagement now looked me in the eyes when I spoke, even when I said hard things. One Wednesday afternoon, she arrived with a book tucked under her arm. "How to Reconnect with Parents You've Hurt." I didn't laugh. I didn't roll my eyes. I simply reached for it, flipped through the dog-eared pages and said, "Let's read it together." We took turns highlighting passages, talking about them over tea. I discovered we both hated chamomile and both had kept a secret collection of notes from each other, little scraps from birthday cards, old lunchbox letters. She had one I'd written in 1999 that read, "Even if you forget your lines at the talent show, I'll still clap the loudest." She whispered, "You did." And we sat with that. The healing was not dramatic. It wasn't made for social media. It was ordinary, which is what made it real. Sometimes she'd help me carry groceries. Sometimes I'd send her a link to a new article from Silver Dignity. We didn't talk about the fall often, or the video. But when it came up, she didn't flinch anymore. She had begun volunteering herself, offering free consultations to people trying to remove unwanted content online. She worked with Carlos once to help a young woman whose ex had posted old voicemail messages as memes. Jessica said, "It's the first time I used what I know for someone else's privacy instead of profit." I told her that was grace in motion. She smiled in that lopsided way she used to when she was a teenager. Before all the layers hardened between us. One chilly evening in late autumn, Jessica brought over a paper she'd received in the mail. It was the official court notice confirming the full takedown of all monetized copies of the video. A quiet finality. We stood together in my kitchen, staring at it. "This doesn't undo everything," she said. "But I hope it gives you peace." I folded the paper and placed it in the drawer beside my old recipe cards. "It does," I said. "Not because of the ruling, but because you're still here." Jessica looked around my kitchen, taking in the chipped tile, the sun-warped cabinet doors, the same kettle that whistled every morning. "I was thinking," she said, "maybe we could work on something together. Something that isn't about going viral. Maybe a resource for other families who are trying to heal from this kind of breach." I raised an eyebrow. "Like a mother-daughter guidebook?" "Sort of," she said. "With real stories. Real mistakes. Not curated. Just honest. I considered it. Only if we co-author it. Equal voice." She grinned. "That's the only way I'd want it." We agreed to take it slow. Outline first. Notes and shared journals. We gave ourselves rules: no late-night edits, no rush to publish. Just intention. I found that the writing came easier than I'd expected. Not because I was ready to relive every detail, but because I had already walked through the worst of it. The wounds had turned to scars. And scars, as I'd come to learn, don't go away, but they don't bleed anymore, either. We titled the draft, "Consent and Connection," a mother-daughter reckoning. It didn't matter if it ever got printed. What mattered was that we were writing it together, with consent on every page. Jessica started attending therapy less frequently. I still met with Maria once a month. Sometimes we spoke about the past. Other times, about legacy. I told her I wanted to donate a portion of the court damages to fund digital consent education for seniors. "I may not change the world," I said, "but I can change the conversation." She told me I already had. One evening, Jessica and I were sitting on the couch, writing side by side, when she turned and asked, "Do you remember the video of me falling off the bike when I was 10? I winced. "Yes. You posted that too, I know. Do you remember what you said when I cried?" I searched my memory. "I think I told you it made the fall worth it, because the video got so many comments." Jessica nodded slowly. That's when I learned pain could be currency. Her words gutted me, but I didn't rush to fill the silence. After a pause, she added, "That's also why I needed to learn that apology isn't a transaction, and healing isn't a spectacle." I looked at her and realized something had changed. Not just in her, but in me. We were no longer trapped in the roles of performer and audience. We were simply two people, living past the shame, reshaping our story one sentence at a time. 6 months after the fall, I stood at the front of a small room in the city library, not the one where Silver Dignity first met, but a larger event. Space with glass walls and a modest podium, and read aloud the final paragraph of our mother-daughter guidebook. Jessica sat in the front row, pen in hand, her notebook balanced on her knee. Carlos was next to her, recording the audio with a tiny handheld device, not a phone, and only after asking permission from every speaker. Behind them sat a dozen others, caregivers, retirees, 2 high school students from the community journalism club, and a woman I recognized from the clinic who had once silently passed me a tissue in the waiting room. I cleared my throat. Dignity, I read, isn't something others grant you. It's something you reclaim. Not all at once, but inch by inch. Through boundaries. Through silence when you choose it. Through voice when you need it. Through the sacred, quiet work of choosing what remains private and what you finally decide to share. When I finished, No one clapped right away. They didn't have to. The stillness in the room said enough. The kind of quiet that means we heard you. I stepped down slowly, gripping the side rail. I wasn't frail, not anymore, but I moved with caution, not out of fear of falling, but out of respect for the ground that had once humbled me. Jessica met me halfway down the steps and offered her hand, not because I needed it, but because she wanted to. I took it. We sat together during the Q&A. People asked thoughtful questions about digital boundaries, about reconciliation, about what it means to be known without being exposed. I spoke carefully, not as an expert, but as someone who had lived it. There's no such thing as a perfect ending, I said. But there is such a thing as a beginning that doesn't hurt. Afterward, a woman named Ruth approached me. Her daughter had created a prank account in college full of private family footage she didn't even know existed. Ruth was still trying to decide whether to forgive. Take your time, I told her. Anger has its place. So does distance. Forgiveness isn't a door you open because someone knocks. It's a room you build when you're ready to let someone back in. She nodded. And what if I'm never ready? Then that's honest, I said. And it's yours to decide. Back home, the apartment felt fuller than usual. Not crowded, just lived in. Plants lined the kitchen windowsill, most of them surviving, one thriving. A new quilt lay folded across the arm of the sofa, a gift from one of the women at Silver. Dignity. It was stitched with words embroidered around the border. Seen. Safe. Still hours dot the photo of me as a child, the one I used to keep hidden in a folder now lived in a frame above my writing desk. Not for decoration. Not as a wound. But as a witness. This was the girl who once didn't know how to say no. This was the woman who had finally learned. I still wore the apron dress. The fabric was thinner now at the elbows, and the pockets had stretched with years of use. But it fit me better than anything else. It was mine. Like the scar at my wrist, like the pendant I still wore even when I slept. That night, Jessica stayed. For dinner. We didn't talk about followers or lawsuits. We didn't rehash the past. We made lentil soup and laughed about how she still couldn't dice an onion without crying. I showed her how to use a proper chef's knife. She showed me how to save an email draft in Google Docs. When she left, she kissed my cheek, not hurried, not performative, just a daughter saying goodbye. I sat by the window afterward, watching the street lamps blink on one by one. The same neighborhood I'd lived in for decades, but now it looked a little different. Not because it had changed, because I had. I no longer lived waiting for things to end badly. I lived building the kind of endings I could stand inside, even if they weren't clean, even if they didn't tie up neatly, even if some parts still ached. Sometimes, dignity isn't a fight. Sometimes, it's a return. To your name, to your skin, to your voice. No longer a footnote in someone else's story, but the story itself.